when the immovable object of our rigid structures meets the irresistible force of spiritual dissolution, what version of reality remains? We are standing at the edge of a cosmic reset where the old world is melting away and the seeds of an unknown future are finally beginning to emerge. Hey there, Truth Seeker. Welcome to the Star Kittens community where we discuss 13 sign astrology. Are you in alignment with your divine design? Do you want to master the metaphysical reality? Open the doors of perception. Each planetary body is an archetype, a template, if you will, that helps us interpret human behavior and the world around us. The more awake and aware we are, the more synchronicity will show up in your life. Our focus today is the new moon in Pisces and the conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. To help us reach more souls with this important message, please like, share and subscribe. There's a lot going on, so let's jump in. Kia ora, David.
Kia ora.
We're living in a very exciting, tumultuous, absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And it's kind of fitting in a way that we are going to discuss the new moon in Pisces. We see Pisces as the sign of dissolution and emergence. So let's see what is going to emerge today. But first, I will tell the audience where this new moon is occurring. So here in New Zealand, it happens on the 19th of March at 2:23 p.m. And the sun moon are conjunct at 6 degrees Pisces. Of course, we use the 13 signs. We use the true position of the planetary body. So the sun only moved into Pisces around the 13th of March here in New Zealand. So tell us, what is this Piscean energy telling you/us?
Well, Pisces is a melting pot of energies, of frequencies and vibrations. This is where our emotional, our physical and our mental experiences all dissolve. So when we talk about dissolution, we're talking about the soul's journey through the houses, which it arrives, or the soul arrives in Pisces to have a reckoning of sorts of all experiences that have been that have taken place with the soul's journey that began in Aries. So this is a energy of where form and substance dissolves, and what comes out the other side of it, as you say, is unknown, and that's what we mean about emergence. So Pisces is very cyclical in nature. It is the end of a cycle. And of course, when we're talking about the end of something, we're also talking about something new is beginning. But before we get to the classic one door closes and another opens, there's a process that we as individuals and we as a collective must go through. So energy, frequency, vibration, and the spectrum of colours, as an analogy, where all those colours, say the red, the orange, the yellow, the green, the blue, the indigo and the violet, and all energies, frequencies and vibrations all come together. So when you get a melting pot like that, or an alchemical process as we do in Pisces, it's not known what is going to emerge out the other side. And so there is a question mark that always hovers around Piscean energy, insofar as, yes, we know what form and substance looks like going in, but we don't necessarily know what's going to come out the other side, either as inspiration or insight, either as a new form of beliefs or ideas, new emotions that could emerge out of trauma that gets melted away. Pisces is also where I believe we see karma fully in action. And the way that I describe karma is that it is cause and effect actions and reactions. And so these ideas that we live by, many of us, both individually and collectively, of polarity, this idea of we describe and define reality in these polarity, in this sort of dualistic sense of the words that we use, like hot and cold, black and white, hate and love, positive, negative, masculine, feminine, heaven and hell, right and wrong, sin and salvation. All of those types of ideas are on the table when we get to Pisces, because at the end of the day there is no polarity, there's only a melting pot. And so we get this situation where concepts that we have anchored our beliefs and our concepts of the world will pass away. So if we have certain beliefs around right and wrong, for example, or positive and negative, or heaven and hell, or whatever it is, then a lot of that is going to be shaken up. And that's important for us to digest and focus on, because, as you said in the intro, we don't really know what's going to come out the other side. So the Ouroboros, or the image of the snake eating its own tail, is appropriate here. The idea that everything gives way to nothing. The idea of beginning and end. The idea of time and tides. And the idea of a cosmic reset, a rebalancing, a reorientation, a reconfiguration. A spiritual alchemy is taking place, a refinement. And this is where our soul meets spirit. This is where we descend originally, the soul and the spirit descend into matter, and that's what gives us life. But of course in Pisces, the soul emerges and spirit emerge from matter. So it leaves it behind. This is where we define Pisces as the masculine godhead, and we define Ophiuchus as the feminine godhead. So in the masculine energy, we're talking about the outcomes or the outpourings of a Pisces energy are often refined art and creative expression, music, light, sound. And again, what emerges in Aries is a new form, is new ideas, is refined emotions, is new visions, is new energy. And if we think about the idea of the spectrum, we may go in as an individual. Let's say, as an analogy, we go in with a red energy, we might come out with an orange energy. We might go in with a blue energy, and we might come out with an indigo or a violet energy. This, what I'm saying there, illustrates the idea of transformation at the end of a cycle, at the end of a line. So this is a very important energy. It's hard to define. It's hard to make any predictions. But one thing is for sure, is that as an individual and as a collective soul, as an individual soul and a collective soul, once we go through a Pisces experience, we will always come out the other side different, changed, reset, rebalanced, reoriented, reconfigured, whatever the words are, that we will go through a process of refinement and alchemy. And that is both exciting, but also for some can be incredibly difficult, because we have to let go of what it is that we know, especially in the physical form, because that is about to dissolve and to pass away into something new.
Yes, and it's something that you said yesterday, how in the time we have known each other that you have seen me grow / change, and I believe you, but at the same time I'm like, have I really? And it's sometimes we need to have the same experience 5 years later, and it's the way how we react to that situation that shows us that we have indeed worked on our resilience, or we just are able to view things in a different light, because we're constantly changing. We never wake up as the same person. With the things we have seen, endured, witnessed, lots to witness at the moment. So the Sun Moon in Pisces is making a conjunction with Saturn in Pisces as well. Yes, Saturn is still at the beginning stages of Pisces at 11 degrees. Saturn is the guardian of Capricorn. How is this energy influencing the new moon?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and you asked me the other day about Saturn in Pisces, and there is a lot of interpretations out there from various podcasters and astrologists and so on, talking about this particular energies of what does it mean when Saturn is in Pisces, or what does it mean when Saturn and Neptune come together. But very simply, the big picture is that Saturn represents form, and if Saturn represents form and also the pinnacle of physical form, when we've described before that Saturn, or the Capricorn energy, Saturn and Capricorn being two sides of the same coin, is that if the physical experience begins in the Taurus energy, then it concludes in the Capricorn or Saturnian energy. And this is what lends or gives Saturn the idea, or many people view Saturn as a taskmaster, as the overseer of lessons learned. And when we think about it, the lessons that we're learning and the tasks that we're having to confront, and we go back to what I said before about cause and effect, is that this is the pinnacle of the physical experience as an individual, the Saturn energy. But also on a collective level, this is the pinnacle of the great institutions that many of us have grown up with. The great institutions that underpin our reality, that get enshrined in the Saturnian structures. And they are things like, religious structures, economic structures, political structures, governance structures. And there's just a whole list of them. Anywhere where there is rigid form that has, maybe decades and decades behind it, has been built over a long period of time. That also speaks to the Saturnian energy, is that, the Saturn cycle is roughly 30 years. So anything that we're dealing with in Saturn has behind it potentially 3 decades of growth. And what that means is that Saturn, by nature, is resistant to change. And if we think about the resistance to change coming into the Piscean energy of dissolution, that makes for a very interesting dynamic, of course. If we play that out on an individual level, what that means is that some of our beliefs and the way that we have constructed our lives will be on the table and may not come out the other side quite in the same way that it went in. When we think about the collective and some of the great institutions that are melting away right now, we don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about that, but you can just look around and you can see everywhere that many of the, what I would call touchstones of the last 30, 60, 90 years, maybe 2, 3 Saturn cycles that have taken place, things like media, things like politics, things like education, things like healthcare, which are very big Saturnian systems, they are melting away, and they are going through this process of what I said before about Pisces. They are morphing into something different. They are being reoriented, recalibrated, reconfigured into something different. So Saturn represents the pinnacle of physical form, as I mentioned before, or structure and institutions. And by nature, it is rigid and inflexible and has a lot of rules around it. And I like to describe Saturn in a Pisces moon situation, and also we're going to talk about its conjunction with Neptune. This is an immovable object of Saturn meeting an irresistible force of Pisces and Neptune. So we look at this from the perspective of what lessons are we learning and will we learn, and are we open to the idea of learning lessons and mastering maybe some issues in our lives on an individual level that we've been grappling with a long time. That's where the taskmaster idea of Saturn comes in. And this is where the idea of wisdom also is born, because, we've all heard the expression, wisdom comes from experience, and it's easy to be wise in hindsight. And I think that's valid too, because sometimes we need to go through, and you touched on that before, we need to go through some tough stuff before we can really understand how to master it and how to develop wisdom. And those are positive aspects of the Saturnian energy. The Saturn in and of itself is the energy or the archetype of a ruler, but it can also be a mentor. Many Saturn mentors are wise and they give good counsel, but the dark and shadow side of Saturn is autocratic rulers, inflexible rulers, and those that lord it over us. Saturn, when we think about cause and effect, this is where we confront our personal and collective karma. And we also navigate the illusion, and this is almost a segue into what we're going to talk about with Neptune and Pisces, but we navigate illusion and delusion of the material world. When we look at the card that is commonly associated in the Rider-Waite Tarot deck for Saturn, we see a horned figure sitting on a box, and we see two humans, a male and a female, that are supposedly chained to this horned figure. And that horned figure represents our idea of the illusion of the material world. And when you look at the Rider-Waite card for Saturn, or Capricorn in this case, those chains that are around the necks of the masculine and the feminine figure depicted in that card are not tight, they're actually loose. And what that says is that we have the free will to unshackle ourselves from the Saturnian structures, but it takes courage. And it's very easy to be crushed and subdued by Saturnian energy, but at the same time, if we see it as an opportunity to develop and learn wisdom and courage and resilience, a word you used before, and discipline and perseverance, rugged individualism, fortitude, guts, at a time when we need all of those qualities, we need all of those positive qualities, that strength of character as we go through incredible changes, both on an individual and collective level. That Saturn, to me, represents a turning point, a juncture. But I like to look at the positive, but we've also touched on the negative, that, it can be a dark, overwhelming experience in Saturn, but it can also be incredibly positive and uplifting. It really just depends on how you look at it.
Yes, and being willing to grow for you as an individual, and hopefully embracing that as we all step into that growth with the setbacks. But if we all step into that power, then we as a collective will just take quantum leaps. So you've mentioned a couple of times already that we will be talking about Neptune as well. So just to remind you listening, so the new moon is at 6 degrees Pisces, Saturn is sitting at 11, and right in the middle at 9 degrees Pisces we have Neptune. Neptune, of course, is sitting in its home sign of Pisces, and this beautiful melting pot of energies all coming together. Please share with us.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this, the Neptune, Saturn and Pisces together, I immediately thought about, or asked the question, what is passing away? And that's the question that we all need to be asking ourselves, both individually and collectively, when these two massive planetary energies of Neptune and Saturn are together, especially in a new moon scenario. So what is passing away? What will emerge in its place? This is an opportunity when we have Neptune especially in its home sign, as I said, of Pisces, to gather and gain vision and foresight into the future. We will be able to, through the process of mindfulness and meditation, if we are quiet and we are still and we listen, if we go in with a meditation, a mandala, if you like, or a question might be, we ask Spirit what form or what is passing away, and then we meditate on that, or we're mindful of that. That we ask Spirit to show us through vision and foresight what is unfolding, what may be emerging. And this isn't going to be easy to see because Neptune, especially in Pisces, is inherently fuzzy and ephemeral and fleeting, and it's difficult to anchor what we may see, especially through our mind's eye or through our creative impulse. We may think that we're seeing an emerging future, but it may equally disappear on us because of the fleeting and the high frequency nature of Neptune and Pisces together. But here's where Saturn plays a beautiful role, insofar as Saturn will enable us to ground some of that vision and that imagination, or imagineering is a word that comes to mind. If we are imagining what will come when Neptune moves into Aries, which will be the beginning of a new cycle. I'm not sure exactly when that is, but what we may begin to see now in our mind's eye, through our third eye, through the process of mindfulness and meditation, about the future, about what is emerging from this dissolution of form, we may be able to seed into our reality and begin to plan for a new reality now. So there is an opportunity to look into and peer into the field, if you like. So Neptune and Saturn together form a bridge between form and formlessness, was one of the notes that I wrote. And this is also, Neptune provides a portal or a pathway or a channel to our best self. We can access our soul very easily in this energy. We can ask our soul to reveal to us the lessons that we need to learn and conclude. I've talked about the idea of Saturn cycles. There are things that we need to bring to a head and dissolve or resolve and let go of, both as an individual but also collectively. But this Saturn and Neptune energy requires us to contemplate, to focus on what is emerging but also what is passing away. So we have this tension between letting go but also being present to what is likely to arrive in the future. But the Saturn creation of form doesn't happen immediately. It takes time, and that's part of the key to Saturn, is that we may be able to creatively see a vision for a new way of living, a new way of structuring ourselves, both individually and collectively, but it's going to take the Saturnian discipline and time and energy and effort to actually get there. So that's where I think they're actually a beautiful combination, these two planets. But of course, they're not. This is not for the faint-hearted. This is incredibly demanding. If we are thinking about, as an individual, what might be passing away in our lives, and we think about that Saturn cycle being 30 years, we may have been building something for the last 30 years. You know, for me at 60, I'm I've just been through my second Saturn cycle. So I am confronting, as an example, maybe 2 Saturn cycles of form that I've created in my life, which is 50, 60 years of endeavor, that I need to put on the table and say, under the Pisces Neptune energy, and say, is that going to serve me in my third Saturn cycle? For those that are going through their first Saturn cycle, or are nearing 30, or have just got through that period, or even midway between the first Saturn cycle and the second Saturn cycle, you too will be touched by this, because some of what you've created diligently and put a lot of effort into, which is Saturn, and you may feel like you've mastered a bunch of stuff. Maybe under this Neptune Pisces energy, the soul may be saying that was great for back then, but it's not going to help you going forward. So Saturn anchors us in the here and now, whereas Neptune opens us to an awareness of what is to come, what is beyond the five senses of touch, sight, scent, meaning, hearing and taste. That's all Saturnian energies. This Neptune Pisces energies allows us, if I go back to the colours, the Roy G. Biv, this allows us to traverse metaphorically from the red to the orange to the yellow to the blue. In other words, to move through the colour spectrum, which are fields of experience, is the way that I like to illustrate. That's why I talk about the spectrum of colours is actually a range of experiences. And when we're talking about Saturnian energy moving through Pisces and Neptune, one way to maybe anchor that idea would be to think about, now I'm moving from a red experience to an orange experience, or from an orange experience to a yellow experience, or from a blue experience to a green experience, and so on and so forth. That may be one way to simply look at what's going on. But the risk, of course, with Neptune is that we can be caught up in both individual and collective delusion and hypnosis, and that idea of an unwillingness and an inflexibility under Saturn to let go of the past may mean that we are lulled into a false sense of security that maybe we don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Some of this Saturnian energy that's coming through is really oppressive. When we think about some of these institutions, they've had their time, they've served their time, and it's hard to transition to something different, especially when we're not sure. But this is why I say we need to be mindful, and we need to meditate, and we need to go into this place of peace when we meet with our soul and our spirit. But we ask the questions, what is passing away and what is emerging? So we pose that question to source consciousness. I also thought about, and I wrote down a little list of how Neptune and Pisces on the one energies and Saturn contrast and conflict. So Saturn is what is seen, and Neptune and Pisces is what is unseen. Saturn is institutions, and Neptune and Pisces is human connection. Saturn is dominant, and I wrote that Pisces Neptune is savvy. Saturn is overt and aggressive, and Pisces energy is smart and clever and subtle. Saturn energy is blunt and subversive, and Pisces energy is emergent. Saturn energy can be brutish, and Pisces Neptune energy can be refined and cultivated and just. And finally, Saturn is, in a way, the short game, and Neptune is the long game. Sounds odd when we think about a Saturn cycle of 30 years, but in the context of Neptune, which is the ether, which is the end of cycles, Saturn is absorbed into Neptune. So Saturn's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years means nothing in the long game of Neptune.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to see those two energies together and how we can, I think, use both of them to our advantage. You know, sometimes we have to play the short game, and other times we just have to go with the flow and ride the long wave all the way home.
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed our conversation and want to stay in touch, we have just started up a newsletter, so you can find the link in our profile. So please sign up, and we will let you know where to listen to the new and full moon blogs. You can book a reading by a chat and follow us on both Telegram and Instagram. Thank you so much, David. Have you got any parting messages?
My only parting message is that for those who follow or are aware of or understand the idea of the fourth turning and the first turning, that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction to me illustrates that perfectly. That the fourth turning is represented by the archetype of Saturn, and the idea of Pisces being dissolution and emergence, and the first turning will be the energy of Neptune and Saturn arriving in Aries. And when that happens, we will begin to see what has begun to pass away and what is beginning to emerge, and it's going to be exciting and interesting because we're at the end of a massive, long Saturnian cycle here, and of course when things begin to dissolve it gets really messy. So just be anchored. Look at the Saturn side of what its gift to us is, to be anchored in reality, just to stand firm even when the winds of change are blowing around and sweeping us away. Just be aware that the delusion of Neptune will pass, and what will come on the other side of it is clarity. So we need to be anchored in and getting our feet on the ground and anchored in the Earth's energies, because this high frequency energy of Neptune can be deceptive. It can also sweep us away, and that's what we don't want at this particular point in time.
Very well said. Thank you. Ngā mihi. Until next time.
Namaste.